why do we need advocates? It's because people who are vulnerable, they can't speak up for themselves, they can't defend themselves, they're totally dependent on caregivers, and it is basically, it's a moral duty. So if you're an advocate, it's like, you know, you feel the moral obligation. You probably have empathy, you have compassion, and you know, it's something that you have inside of you. And I think there was just recently, like, empathy and compassion, I believe, is part of the DNA. So, yeah. Well, no, I think they found the DNA or the gene that determines empathy and compassion. So, you know, not everyone is cut out to be an advocate. You know, if you don't have empathy, compassion, it's going to be, you know, a little bit harder, but I'm assuming since you're here, you're probably empathetic. Now, what was discussed this morning, this is just reviewing what was talked about this morning. You know, all CHSLDs have shortcomings. There are some good ones, 30 to 40% are problematic. And even though it's a level playing field, there's a lot of variability, which, you know, makes you wonder, okay, why is there so much variability, you know, when the resources are the same? But that's true, because I experienced a good CHSLD and I experienced a bad one. And the difference is night and day between the two. There really is a lot of variability. So let's say you want to know, it's difficult to get an idea of what a CHSLD is like, you know, whether it's good or bad, unless you know someone, you know, who's living there or you have a friend. So, but there is an online tool that allows you to get a baseline comparison of the various CHSLDs, and that's based on the inspection process that was discussed this morning also. When they do an inspection, the results are put online. Now, that's the URL. You're not going to be able to find it. It's difficult to find, so you need to copy that URL if you want the results of the inspection, the government inspections. Now, it's in French only, but I mean, what you do is you scroll through it. If a CHSLD has like maybe 12 recommendations, then, you know, and there's like 12 criteria, then you know they're doing nothing right, and you know you want to try to stay away from that CHSLD if you can. So this tool, it just really gives you an idea of you know, what the inspectors are saying about a particular CHSLD. So, you know, you can find out, okay, what am I getting into here? Now, it's not foolproof. This is just to give you the gist of what they look at. You know, orientation on arrival. You know, when a resident enters a CHSLD, I mean, it is a complete transformation. You know, they lose their autonomy, they lose control, sometimes they lose their dignity. And so this is looking at, okay, well, how well does the CHSLD orient people, you know, to their new life? And, you know, do they give them information? Do they get participation from the family? And what's interesting is, I know a lot of CHSLDs, they don't do well. They don't meet that criteria. Now, you know, number 4, that's just, you know, how well are they implementing the care plan? Number 5, they sort of, you know, they look at how the staff is reacting with residents. Number 6, they do observe a mealtime, but, you know, they're not looking at the quality of the food, which is the biggest complaint. You know, they're just mainly interested in whether the process is organized. So like I said, it's just gives you a general idea of what the CHSLD needs to work on based on the inspection process. Okay, so who is an advocate, or what are the characteristics of an advocate? So an advocate is someone who has a personal relationship with someone who is vulnerable. They make a commitment to empower and support that person because it is a time commitment, time and effort. They stand up for the protection and defense of their rights, so that you have to know what their rights are in order to stand up for them. They respect their wishes, so that's why you have to know the person so that you know what it is that they want. And they're free from any conflict of interest. So an example of that would be, well, let's say an elderly person has a lot of money and he's placed in a public CHSLD. That would be a conflict of interest, rather than being placed in a private CHSLD. He's placed in public with a lot of money. That shows there's a problem here. So, okay, the risk factors. It's people who are vulnerable. They're cognitively impaired. They could be, in a wheelchair, mentally, physically challenged, or they could have like a mental illness. But the common denominator is that they live in an institutional settings, and they rely on the caregiver for their basic necessities. Okay, so in order to really understand advocacy, you have to understand representation. Because if is anyone here a representative for someone? Yeah, okay, so you have an advantage as a representative. You have rights. The Quebec Health and Social Services allows a user of the healthcare system. In this case, the user is a resident in a CHSLD. They're allowed to have a representative. Now, there's 3 types of representatives. This is really a legal topic, and I'll tell you, the management, CHSLD management, they get training on the types of representatives and how to work around it. So it helps if you understand your legal status. So let's say if you're mandatory, then you're fine. That's who the CHSLD wants to talk to. That's because there's a protection mandate which names you as mandatory. If there's no protection mandate, then it falls on the civil code, Quebec Civil Code, and there's a hierarchy. The 3rd type of representation is caregiver by an affidavit. So the user signed an affidavit, they're of sound mind, and they're giving responsibility to you as a representative. Now, in English, it's really hard to find information on the different types of representation. So you can look at droit en santé. Even in French, it's difficult. So droit en santé does give a good explanation. So for instance, if you're a de facto caregiver, there's flexibility there. The family can decide who is going to be the representative. You don't necessarily have to follow the hierarchy as long as the family agrees that, okay, this person will be the representative. Now, the CHSLD, they might tell you no. So it's, it helps to know what your legal status is, unfortunately. Does anyone, you want to ask questions? I'm not a lawyer, but you get the general idea. There's one, you can only, the CHSLD is required to speak with one person. Okay, so, and I think as long as a family can decide, agrees on who that person is, then they should listen to you. Yes? Yeah, what I'm telling, these 3 types of representation is before legal guardianship is declared. Okay, once it goes to court, the mandate's homologated, then everything that happened before is wiped out. In that case, there's no flexibility. The legal guardian is responsible. Now, NDGCCEA, we also do have a bit of training on representation. if you go to our website, you'll see it, the information you'll see in English. And like I said, I wasn't able to find the information anywhere in English about the different types of representation. Now, what's good about a representative is that you can exercise the 12 user rights the same way as the user. Now, but if you're an advocate and you don't have representation, you know, your role in that case is to defend their user rights. You cannot exercise the user rights. So there is a distinction there. So if you're a representative, you know, it's the same as though you were the actual user. So the first, of course, is right to information. You know, you're supposed to be able to get, you know, test results, you know, anything from a doctor. It's as if, you know, if you're in a hospital and you want information about your treatment plan, well, it's the same thing in a CHSLD. It's the same right that you're allowed to have. And right to consent to care or to refuse care. This one is important. If you're a representative, it means, you know, you can speak up for the resident. You can, you know, you can say, no, I don't accept the care plan. I want this changed in the care plan. It's as though it was the user themselves who was speaking. So, and in order to consent to care or to refuse care, you need to have informed consent. Informed consent just means, you know, that you have the information that you need to make the decision, like everything that's in number 1. Now, you have the right to actively participate in decision making. You can, when you first get to the CHSLD, you should be involved in the treatment plan. You know, and again, you can reject or accept the care plan. You can get a copy. Like, you have the right to know what's going on. So, and you know, you're lucky if you're a representative, you can get involved in the care. Unlike an advocate, it's just like an extra tool. Now, we're not saying you have to be a representative to be an advocate, but it does help. So, like, these are just really the most important rights that you have, because the 12 user rights, they're really for the Health and Social Services Network, but this is what you're going to want to use in a CHSLD. Now, there are other rights also. Not everything is included in the 12 user rights. So for instance, you have the right to choose a professional. So a resident can choose their own doctor. It's a right. The problem there is the CHSLD, they might not include it in their care plan. But you know, you do have a right to choose your own doctor. It's just it's not sure that the CHSLD will follow the treatment that doctor, you know, like let's say it's a specialist. Some families have problems with specialists. They need specialized care. And, you know, the CHSLD, they say, no, it's our care plan. We don't want to follow it. You know, we only follow our own care plan. So there are some issues there. You have the right to be accompanied, assisted, and represented. So if you're a representative and you're going to a meeting, just like a user, you can, you know, bring a friend with you. And that's a good idea if you're going to a meeting, because what they do is they try to outnumber you in a meeting. So, you know, it's always good to go with someone and maybe even ask, okay, you know, how many people are going to be there? Because you want to avoid being outnumbered if you can. Okay, you have the right to... Okay.
Bring in someone else, often actually, as Johanne discussed earlier in the other workshop, confidentiality to exclude the extra people.
Okay, well, yeah, that's it. I mean, they have so many tricks. Yeah, that's, yeah. Okay, so you have the right to choose the same sex as in the caregiver. This actually is a right from a directive, because there was a court case.
Is this a new right?
It was a court decision. Now, it's called a directive They should be following it because it's already gone through the court system. It's what's called a directive. Well, now you know. You tell them, hey, this has already been judged. There's no it shouldn't have to be.
There is not the staff.
Well, that's but you do have the right to make the request, and if it's possible, they should be following it.
Yes, it's not possible. It's possible.
Yeah. No.
There's always a female staff member somewhere on the floor.
Yeah,
There's
and
always, I think. It's
female,
always
yes.
possible.
Yeah.
But they pretend
But
they don't
usually
know.
they stick them in.
One nurse pretends she doesn't know because the previous one didn't tell her. So you have to make sure it's in the file. Because I did that
Yeah.
with my mom, but for 10 years they weren't following.
It's not only,
They don't write it.
Yeah, it's well, again, it depends on, okay, are you in a good CHSLD or a bad one? In a good one, it's the upper 40%. They do exist. So in the right to specialized services, it's not a user right, but it's in the Act Respecting Health and Social Services, the number's there if you want to read about it. And so let's say a resident wants to sleep in the morning, that's a specialized service. I talked to a lawyer about this. They should have the right to sleep in the morning if they want to. Yeah, it's in the Act. Just you can look it up yourself. Article 103. Not so much that they can sleep in.
But they won't get their meal or something?
Yeah, they put it in the fridge, or whatever. Just look at the NDGCC online training. That's one of the examples. Okay, so now what you want to do as an advocate or a representative, you have a role. So know what your role is when you're in a CHSLD. Role confusion is one of the worst things. It causes stress, misunderstanding. People, step on each other's toes. Like, role definition is important in any scenario. Now, your role is to know the person, know the user, and know what their needs are. Okay, that's what you're there for. You're there to relate what their requirements are. You're not a healthcare worker. Okay, so don't confuse the role, and that should, solve a lot of issues. And use, I am worried. What can you do? Put the ball in their cart. Don't tell them what to do, because they don't. PAB doesn't like that. They're the specialist. Understand what your role is. And, if you have a background in health care, then, you're going to have a problem. But, try to stick to your role, which is to identify the needs of the resident. Of course, don't express anger under any circumstance, because they will start a file against you, and never attack the individual. Just attack the problem. You're in a system. No one is at fault here. It's the system. So just with these simple techniques, you could be fine. You could get through the whole process, as long as it's a somewhat good CHSLD, and you follow these tips. Yeah. We interviewed a nurse, supervisory nurse, and what she said is, sometimes she has family coming up to her. They're really upset. They don't even introduce themselves. She doesn't even know, who are they talking about? And then right away they just, start complaining about the care. Don't do that. So from the nurse's point of view, change the attitude, use a collaborative approach, and it'll be much better. So, use respectful language. Don't ring the bell repetitively. They don't like that. That would count as harassment. Never threaten the staff. And if you're getting upset, just do whatever it takes. Take time out, go with the flow, whatever it is, whatever technique you have. Don't get mad, because there's no point. And you have to watch your behavior. Okay, so let's say, there are a few things. You're noticing a few things. So as an advocate, your role is to collect information and data. So to come at different times of the day, take notes. It's always good, take notes of the date, time, person, so that you know what's going on. You can take photos, videos, bring someone with you just to get like another perspective and start building a file, with your note-taking, and look to see if there's a pattern. Now, you can't find a pattern unless you have data to work with. And just last thing is just, speak with the resident committee, because they also have information. They're like a good sounding board, and they want to hear from you, from what I understand, right? Is someone's here? Yeah, like you want to talk to family. Yeah, okay. Yes?
Told you not allowed to take photos in the institution.
Really, Okay, well that's because, you can take videos because you're allowed to put up a video camera. Yeah, we'll get to that also. That surprises me.
Don't be surprised, they don't want evidence of anything.
Well, okay, then I don't know. Yeah. Okay, so each CHSLD has its own organizational policies. There's a policy for everything. This information is public, and it helps you build a file if you know what their policies are. If you really want to get into it and you want information, ask them what their policy is. And there was a question that came up before, like if they're telling you it's 9:30 in the evening and you have to leave, well then what do you say? You say, okay, show me the policy. Where's the policy for that? So, use their policies against them. It's a tool. And especially if you're in a user or residence committee, you should have access to their policies. And again, it's public information. Just ask for the information, the person who has access to information. Okay, and then it just helps you, ask questions and so on. Okay, so at this point, you're having a bit of problem. So you want to speak to the right person. Now, maybe that's a problem, finding out who to speak to. But anyway, start at the bottom. Start with the PAB. Try to work things out with the PAB. That's part of the formal complaint process, is always try to work things out within the organization. It's because it's the only way that you're going to get results. You don't have a choice. So you start with a PAB, then up the hierarchy, it's the nurse on duty. If that doesn't work, go to the next level, the head nurse, and then the coordinator at large. From what I understand, is the person responsible, but it's because of the reorganization, they have made some changes, and my understanding now is that really no one is responsible, and this is creating problems for people. Like they just run around and they don't know who to speak to. Yeah. Let's say you're not getting anywhere and you're really getting desperate. The media is not a good idea. A lot of people think, okay, if I go to the media, it's going to help. Not really, because that could really create like a backlash. It's not the best idea. For professional order maybe would work. There's a professional order for nurses and doctors. Ura has had some success with going to the professional order. And then there's the formal complaint process where you submit a written complaint to the regional commissioner. Now, a lot of people are disappointed with the formal complaint system. It's time consuming, it takes 45 days, and you just really get a recommendation. But if you're going to go through the trouble of making a formal complaint, then do send it to the Protection des Citoyens, which is the ombudsman. And that's just because only when you get to the ombudsman are you outside the health and social services network.
But sometimes you can send it directly
Yeah, at this point, you're having a hard time. You know, you can ask for a meeting, but if you want results, immediate results, you have to work within the institution. So also you can try sending a letter. If you're going to send a letter, then CC a third party. That way the letter's not confidential. And, you know, you're going outside the Health and Social Services Network. Now, I guess what sort of bothers me about the reorganization is that, like, no one's responsible, it seems. You know, there's a site coordinator, but he just has administrative role. So I think that's something they need to work on. Yeah, the new government. Okay, so now, if you're having this kind of problem, there's probably intimidation going on. Intimidation is to make someone timid or fearful, as if by threats. Intimidation is very subtle. You know, you can try, can I see your policy for that if they intimidate you? And it's, again, don't get upset. You're in a system. There's a power imbalance.
I heard you say that often, and I understand where you're coming from. It's just when we meet with families on a regular basis, they're upset because obviously, I'm sorry, it's easier said than done.
To get the policy?
To not get upset. To not get mad.
Yeah.
And I know that you're saying it, and I know the reasons why you're saying it, but I can foresee that families becoming frustrated because they're so desperate that their loved ones are well taken care of, and they're just lost in the whole system.
Yeah.
As you said, there's no one really held responsible or accountable. So, when caregivers, family members are burnt out, when they're dealing with the guilt about that their loved ones are now not living with them at home, it's very easy for them to kind of not know what to do, and a reaction is to get upset. So we try to advocate and try to help guide the families, but I'm just sensitive. I keep hearing, don't get mad.
Don't get upset.
And I understand that, people, it's hard not to.
Yeah. Well, that's why, if you work in healthcare, it must be really hard because, but what can you, there's really no point in getting upset though, because they will start a file.
It's just emotional, right?
Yeah.
It's hard it's easy for an outsider to say, don't get upset, just take your time. But it's that emotional connection.
Right.
And like, oh my gosh, what am I going to do? I can't leave them I can't leave them alone. Because if you leave them alone, what's going to happen? Then they have to hire caregivers around the clock, or they feel like they have to stay there.
A lot of.
So there's a lot of fear, and that's why people ultimately get upset.
No, I know. Yeah, a lot of families hire a private caregiver as an advocate. Yeah. Okay, so you are dealing with a system. There could be deliberate cover-ups, and you're in a relationship where there's a power imbalance. So if you're starting to make too many demands, this is what's going to happen. They'll start a file on you. They will meet you to try to resolve the tension. They could call a multidisciplinary meeting and have 10 people show up at the meeting, to put you in your place. They'll give you warnings, maybe. Actually, they can ask you to sign a contract, good behavior. And what could be really annoying, upsetting, is if they limit your visiting rights. Now, at that point, you have to call a lawyer. That's what lawyers are there for. If they start limiting your visiting rights, that's when lawyers come in. And so, it's because they have a routine. And if you're there, if you break their routine, the system will react. They don't like it when their routine is disturbed.
It's not a dictatorship we live in.
It's authority.
It's not Saudi Arabia. My parents left Syria to come here.
Yeah.
I don't think it's better than Syria.
It's an authoritarian
I'm sorry.
management.
They respect the elderly maybe a bit better than here. I
Could
think
be.
this is normal. To read this and to have to accept it in the society we live in Canada, it's disgusting. To look at this
Yeah.
And at work, if I do this to my clients, I get fired. And the nurses and everybody is complicit. We need an
Yeah.
inquiry. This is harassment
Yeah.
at institutional level. And it's public curator, everybody's in it. The doctors, that start files against you because the chief nurse tells them what to do. Everything.
Yeah.
We shouldn't accept that.
Well, I've
If you do, it's like accepting to live in Saudi Arabia. I don't live in Saudi Arabia. My parents left Syria, and I will never accept I mean, it's saying that, you know, I live in a dictatorship.
it's leadership style.
No, because
it's
there's
authoritarian.
advocacy groups have to say enough is enough of intimidation, harassment. You know, enough is enough.
I'm an entrepreneur in the system, okay? You don't know how much abuse I put up with from some clients as well.
Yeah,
It works.
that's it.
Yeah, no, but a lot of us, we're not abusive. We're just there because
I hear it, but you have to understand that it goes two ways. There are days when I'm picking up that phone and I am hearing things as much as I try, and trust me, 35 years I've been this, I fight for my clients' rights, but there are some families that are out of line. So you
Yeah.
have to know when to stop. We want to work together with
well, when my mom had stools in the bath, and I simply told someone, "Is it possible to clean her, or can you please close her coat when we're going out in the winter, minus 30 degrees?" They refused, and just the fact that I asked that, after that, I'm not allowed to be in the bath anymore. So, yeah, but the difference is there's people dying. My mom weighing 80 pounds, the doctor's saying she's in amazing health. I mean, she has perfect weight. I mean, that's criminal. That's criminal, not to feed someone, to let them degenerate.
Okay, so yeah,
Something, it's different, you know? It's not the same. I'm sorry. There's a lot of medical issues.
Okay. Yeah. 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 Okay. So we got to go. Okay. Okay. So if there's intimidation, then there's probably abuse taking place, because that's just the nature of abuse. The two go together, intimidation and abuse. So situations of abuse and neglect, they're characterized by, you know, a person in a position of trust while the resident is under the care and responsibility of the institution. Now, the neglect is the failure to meet the needs of a resident, unable to meet them for himself or herself. So there's two types of neglect, active and passive. And mostly what happens in a CHSLD is a result of passive neglect. Okay, not providing the basic necessities of care, denying services, and that, I mean, that's what's happening in CHSLDs. It's not really abuse so much, because you know, abuse is can be more intentional. It's just passive neglect. It's not intentional. It's just failure to provide a service. So here are some examples, and I think if you look at these examples, I mean, this is what happens in a bad CHSLD. You know, it's passive neglect, you know, ignoring requests, you know, just not giving enough attention, just not giving the care that you as an advocate think, you know, should be there. So there's just, you know, so many ways that passive neglect can happen. Now, abuse, some residents are more at risk of being abused in a CHSLD, you know, those that are, you know, in a wheelchair, cognitively impaired. Like, you could have a capable resident who is fine, loves the place, whereas you see abuse. Abuse is systemic, it's not intentional. I mean, you know, people don't get up in the morning and say, okay, I'm going to abuse someone. You know, people, when they get up in the morning, they want to do a good job. And abuse is complicated because there's no universal agreement on it. And I know with a resident committee, it can be really difficult to identify, okay, when is abuse taking, you know, when do we draw the line? When do we say this is abuse and we need to do something about it? You know, it's defined, interpreted differently according to, you know, the person, the context. If it's a police officer, you know, they might define abuse differently. And also the cultural background. You know, there could be different values on what constitutes abuse. and in particular quality of life. And now even within a family, there can be a different value system, because it's whether or not you think there's abuse, it's a value that you have, and people have different values. So even within a family, one person could think, okay, this is not correct, whereas another person thinks, no, it's fine. And so, this is what sort of can tear families apart, because it's a difference in values. And, you can't have an argument over values. Values is what defines a person. But again, what to keep in mind, try not to blame the person, blame the system. It's not intentional. Now, again, in trying to recognize whether it's abuse, learn to evaluate the seriousness. And abuse is evaluated based on the consequence. So, then you can just ask yourself these two questions. Did the resident suffer physical, psychological, or emotional harm? And has their, sense of dignity, self-worth, and independence been impacted? But I think normally, if there's abuse, you know it, right? I mean, it's not normal. You can just feel it for the most part. There's intimidation, and something is off. And that's the difference between a good CHSLD and a bad one. And so, like a lot of people, they don't complain because of the fear of reprisals. That's a big problem. So from what I understand, you can do a group complaint, and that way you're anonymous, and that's where the resident committee comes in. If they have enough people, they want, and I think a group complaint is probably, more impactful. And just if you use a collaborative approach, you don't have to mention the name. If you're worried about reprisal, you can stay away from mentioning names, because they will ask you, okay, what's the name of the person? Just avoid it. Don't mention names, and then you should not have to worry about reprisal. If you're following a collaborative approach, you've got your data to back you up. You just say, okay, when, at this time of day, this is what happens. They can go look up who the worker is. You don't have to mention names. So, okay, now again, families, they feel powerless. They fear losing their visiting rights. This is all, what happens in a bad CHSLD, and why families don't complain when they really should be. And so just think, if you as a family, if you're feeling intimidated, think of the residents. Again, it's a moral duty, because intimidation, it's systemic. So the residents, they're also feeling intimidation. It's the same for them, and they live there. So there's just so many ways, a CHSLD can intimidate a resident. This is just one list, and it can go on and on, how they can intimidate a resident. The good news. There is some good news here. Finally, yes. Okay, Bill 115, that's a new act to combat maltreatment of seniors and other persons of full age. This is a new bill. Now, what it means is the CHSLDs, they have to implement a policy to combat abuse, so you can ask them for their policy, Reporting of abuse is now a legal obligation for healthcare workers. And this is what is so important about this bill. It's a legal, not only is it a moral obligation, it is now a legal obligation. Okay, so if you're a healthcare worker, you now have a legal obligation to report abuse. You can be held responsible for not reporting abuse. This is amazing. What's also very good is now you can have a visible camera in the room. Before it had to be hidden. Now you can actually put up a visible camera. So, you know, like I know, I'm sure a lot of people are going to be putting up fake cameras, you know, because it makes a difference. If they see a camera in the room, they're going to watch it. Yeah, I mean, this is amazing. Finally, Quebec is doing something, you know, about elder abuse. Okay, and just downside, I mean, you can call. So what you can do now is you can call. If you see abuse, you're supposed to call the regional commissioner, whereas before they wouldn't even speak to you unless you were a representative. But now, apparently, no. You know, you don't need to be a representative now to make a complaint with the regional commissioner. Anyone can do it. There's some question, since they haven't put additional resources, how are they going to be handling all the complaints? There's, you know, a few issues there, but it's certainly in the right direction.
The other side of that, unfortunately, is that anyone can make a complaint. So sometimes somebody who has a vested interest in perhaps somehow gaining control over said person will complain when really they shouldn't, and they shouldn't make any complaint, and they can win with the office of the. So,
Yeah, well, that's
but they
where
don't vet it very well.
Yeah, that's where you want the data to back it up. You know, I mean, you're an advocate. You've been collecting data all this time. You've got the evidence. So, I mean, you know, if you've got the evidence, then you should have a pretty good chance. Okay. Okay, so now Ura. Sorry, we only have 5 minutes. Your turn. Eh? No.
It's okay, it's okay. I got too much.
Eh? We just go over the slides. Okay. Okay, so Ura is going to talk to us about legal guardianship, because Ura knows more about the public curator than anyone else. It's up to you. You just read what's on the slide.
You have to make the link though.
But everyone's going over time.
Okay. I've been asked to say a few words on the relationship between, the link between CHSLDs, or long-term public care institutions, and the curatorship incapacitated people in that environment, because no one's addressed that specifically, and I specialize in that area. Just originally I was scheduled to speak both in English and French workshops, but then there wasn't sufficient time in the French one, so. But my notes are in both languages, so you're going to have to tolerate with skipping from one to the other. No problem for me, but it may be a problem for a listener. Okay. Because, yeah. I myself have to give my point, my interest, my point of view. And I'd like to specify that I don't speak for the public curator or any institution. We're a community organization, the Association for the Defense of People and Property under Public Curatorship, of which I'm the director. And I present the perspective from the ground, from the community, from the people. First, I want to paint the portrait of the area, a specific area I was asked to talk about. First, definitions. Because it involves legal concepts and terminology, the definitions have to be explained so it's clear in our minds what we're dealing with. It's very specialized. What is inaptitude or incompetency in English? It's a person who's unable to look after themselves or being able to manage their affairs. In the other terms, medical terms or social worker terms, it means or common language, loss of autonomy. Basically, I think a lot of people know that. What are the causes of becoming incapable or inapt? Is the language in the law here? 20% of people who are declared inapt have degenerative illnesses, that's Alzheimer's and different types of dementia, mental health or psychosis, 31%, intellectual deficiency, 40%. It used to be, now it's the degenerative maladies have taken over as the cause, as the greatest cause of people's incapacity. According to the annual report of the public curator, and here we're getting to the point I'm going to make, or the area I'm going to work on, of 2016-2017, which is the latest annual report of the public curator in Quebec, there's a total of 42,000, and that's why I'm here, and that wasn't addressed by the other speakers in all workshops, 42,555 incapable people, and they benefit from measures of protection. So you got a substantial amount of people concerned with the specific area that I deal in. Of those 42,000 plus, 12,450 have made mandates, homologated mandates, and they're looked after by a private family member who's the mandatory. 17,000 are private curators or tutors, and 13,570 are looked after by the public curator. Then there's a few minors who fell into the system also. So all in all, there's 13,000 for the previous year, almost 500 people who are under public curatorship. And overall, there's 42,500, which is the important element, about people who are legally incompetent, and with the dementias increasing with old age, that number's inevitably going to increase, as all projections indicate. So what is a regime of protection established for these people here? It's a legal concept for the purpose of which a person is determined inapt and another person is appointed to make decisions on the incapable person's behalf. Hopefully, and this is where we come into all the problems in this area, in the best interest of that person. When a protective mandate is homologated, the representative is called a mandatory. When there is no protective mandate, or it's not homologated, the representative will be called a tutor or a curator. A tutor is for a person. Tutors for a person who's partially or temporarily incompetent. There's someone who's unconscious temporarily or undergone an operation or whatever, and comes out of it. And the curator is for a person, or curatorships for a person who's totally and permanently inept. Because the inapt person is deprived of the exercise of his rights, it is a legal measure and done by court proceeding, which means lawyers step in where the health falters. What is the public curator among all these different titles? It's a state organism which has three principal functions. It monitors the conduct of private curators and tutors. As I said, you can have private people named. It acts upon tip-off or denunciation and investigates the administration of mandatories who may be abusive of the incapable. And finally, it acts itself, if appointed by the court, as tutor or curator when a person has no one else to look after them. The organization itself has 744 people, or staff, and a budget of $60 million to carry out all three functions, not just look after incapable people. Move on to the English here. And here we're coming to more or less the point of why I was invited here. What is the link between living in a CHSLD or long-term care and incompetency or public curatorship, if it turns out to be that? As I stated earlier, for the past year, according to the annual report, there are 42,000, almost 500 people who are subject of protective regimes in Quebec. A total of 13,570 of them are under public curatorship. So you got a substantial amount of people that can be looked after by the state itself. In 2014, 3,338 wards of the public curator, or 25% of that, were living in CHSLDs. So that's where the link is. Thus, a significant number of residents in CHSLDs and must deal with the public curator, and there's a close link between the two institutions or the two agencies. The link between the public curator and the CHSLDs and long-term care is that Article 263 of the Civil Code of Quebec stipulates that the public curator does not have custody of incapable adults, except for extreme circumstances or special circumstances. So it's the law itself that imposes, that creates the system, and the link between the two institutions. Now, what are the challenges or the particularities or the when a person is that you're dealing with a person who's incapable and ends up under curatorship, either private or public, excuse me. First, and what are the challenges? These are the challenges for an advocate, because we're dealing with advocacy here. First of all, the resident has health deficits, otherwise they wouldn't be in the CHSLD long-term care, which limits the functioning of that person. In other words, as I stated earlier in the definitions, the person is unable to look after themselves or manage their affairs, which is the legal definition. Because of that, they're not functional, they're deprived of decision-making power, and you have these various titles that are put in place to represent them and make decisions on their behalf. In other words,
Okay, so they're like vulnerable people under public
vulnerable
curatorship
people,
are
inevitably,
vulnerable.
and dependent on someone else to make decisions theoretically or hopefully in their best interest. Sometimes strangers, when it's the state or the public curator, it becomes complete bureaucrats who have no link to the person itself, which is the sad
Okay,
part.
but I mean, you can still be an advocate, because I had to deal with the public curator. You can still be an advocate for the person. You know, best case scenario, public curator just sort of hands off. You know, they don't, you know,
Best,
really.
there's the worst.
Well, it's they let the family sort of, you know, take over, but the public curator will make decisions, because public curator is like the representative.
Getting deeper into the relationship here between the two agencies, you end up dealing with two state bodies, a public curator who makes the decisions, and the long-term care, public long-term care institution where the person is placed, and you have to deal with two bodies of law, the Public Curator Act and the Civil Code, and the Health Act, makes life much more complicated in this specialized area. That's the point I'm making here. Yeah. You deal with two bodies of laws. The Health Act has over 500 articles, if those who get into it or read it, actually. And the Civil Code, well, it has hundreds of articles dealing with incapacitated people. And the Public Curator Act, which has another 100 articles, if anyone cares to get into it besides me. Each institution or each agency has its own set of policies, regulations, and procedures. So they complicate his life that much more than just dealing with the long-term care institutions. You're in a complete labyrinth there. You can ask, and you can ask. My name, yeah, Ura, U-R-A. I don't know, is it on here? Greenbaum, Greenbaum. The association, just take the letter, sorry. Association for the Defense of People and Property under Public Curatorship, yeah. We're just up the street here, actually, by the CLSC Metro, just next to it.
If you have beginnings of dementia, or if you have dementia, but it's not official.
If it's not determined by a court, it's not official. That's right.
But you can still get into a CLSC because
Yeah, that's the whole idea. The reason why I gave the statistics before. There's 42,500 incompetent people, but there's beyond that much, much, much more in the CLS, in the long-term care. No. There's people who. There are people in
They're in the
long-term
gray
care.
zone. Most people in CHSLD are in what's called the gray zone.
Yes.
You know, where their faculties are diminished, and that's why they need an advocate or a representative.
I think chances are if they have property, someone's going to force them. I mean, Ura knows more than me, but my mom had a house, and I was forced. My mom could talk and walk, but somehow, I don't know how it all happened. Ura maybe remembers more than me. But the doctor, we were forced to declare her incapacitated, unfortunately. I think when they have property, they're being forced by the public curator or something, but if they don't have property, maybe it's easier to stay in the gray zone, so you don't have to do all that legal stuff, and they can still, listen to you or them, or I think it's better that way, but I don't know.
Just
If you have
return.
property,
No,
though,
sorry.
I think they force
Is there
you.
an article of one of the rules that says you can be placed even before curator, even before the mandate has been promulgated?
No, generally the court has to declare a person part of the law. It's a judicial fee. But if there's an emergency, there is provisional. Excuse me? When there's an emergency situation, extreme situation, there is provisional curatorship or curator incompetency. Provisional in a sense.
Communicated with the curatorship office.
Yeah.
When you don't communicate with the curator's office, when you're still really can't think for yourself, so somebody has to think for you, where is it said that you can be placed in an institution?
Well,
Your wife, your
Bill,
father, your son? We're turning in circles. I can only be in charge of you if you're no longer capable. If you're no longer capable, then there has to be an homologation to say that you're right.
Yeah, you're getting into like representation.
Just hear me one more.
Well, if you pose a question, I'll be glad.
Have a mandate, and it's not homologated, but
Yeah.
in there it says, in case I'm incapacitated, I'd like my son to take care of me.
That's a mandate, a protective mandate you're talking about, yeah. If the mandate is made, then yeah, you need the evaluations. If the two evaluation by a medical evaluation and a social worker's evaluation. If you don't have those, no person will be the court won't put the person under curatorship or homologate the mandate. There are preconditions if you want to. So getting back to my theme or my purpose, just to finish off that chapter or that section, while a CHSLD provides residential, elementary, and basic hygiene and leisure services, the public curator has a separate role, completely a different jurisdiction. It makes the decisions over management of the person and his property. In other words, the curator places the person at CHSLD and manages their property, while the CHSLD provides the services.
Did you have your recommendation? You have 5 minutes for recommendation.
Okay.
Pour la thénière.
Okay. Is anyone taking notes? Is there a note taker?
Okay.
Okay. Well, then someone needs to be responsible. That was one recommendation. In the hierarchy, it's problem. No one is responsible in the CHSLD. That's. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, it's one. Okay.
Yeah, that's a problem right now with the reorganization.
So
Their hierarchy.
just to end off, the few minutes I have there, I gave you the distinction between the two bodies and what the mission of each one is and what their role is. I just want to finish off where you get into the headaches there, even though it's a labyrinth and a double labyrinth, if you want. As I described to you, two bodies, a law and two systems completely interdependent. Basically, the problems people will come to see me for and need help for is, first of all, confidentiality. Just like in the HSLD, under public curatorship, and then even the curatorship, everything's considered the file is considered confidential, and it's a whole battle often to get access and cooperation to get the information. As Anne outlined earlier, if you don't have the information, you don't have the documentation, well, you're stuck because it's your word against the system. And to get access to information, there has to be transparency, but if the file, either both actually in the public curator system and in the health system are confidential, and the law states they are both confidential, there's always a whole battle to find out what's going on and what rights you have and what's wrong if there's things wrong. The other aspect, I want to just finish off here because this is coming to the end. When you're under curatorship, public curatorship specifically, there's no independent external oversight. If the hospital or long-term care, you can go to the protected citoyen, as Anne already dealt with. You can go to the complaints officer in every health establishment. But with the curatorship, there's no one similar to that. There's only the public, there is only the ombudsman, the protected citoyen, but they're completely they're independent, which is a good thing, but on the other hand, they don't have the staff, they don't have the resources, they don't have the expertise. There's, I think, at the Protected Citoyen, there's about 150 people there, and they deal with not only the health system, but all the government bodies that people have complaints against. In other words, the whole state apparatus they handle. So can you imagine the size? They handle over 25,000 complaints a year at the Protected Citoyen. So although it's a good resource because it's independent of the system, as Ad said, and she's right there, and we resort to it very, very often, on the other hand, to expect success is in itself a challenge often.
On the flip side, if no one supervises private curators, are there resources to help private curators do their job?
By all means, we're there. First of all, we're community. We're not official or state government, but there are others. There's the in the medical system, there's the complaints officer, quality. You can, for certain aspects of it, not overall. Overall, I think we're the only ones who do that in the whole province, actually, which is pretty demanding. But when problems crop up, but there's very little specialization outside of us that's independent of the system. You only have the protected citoyen who you can go to send your complaint in, and. So basically, that's the picture that I was asked to present here.
Okay, thanks.
Now, if you have questions, I don't know if we have time, but I'm glad to handle them.
A person of low income
Yes.
that would probably be in need of your services if they're under public curatorship, I think you said it's called.
That's right.
How
All aspects of incompetency.
So how can they handle asking you for assistance if they're on a low income, and probably they are if they're in a public long-term care place?
Well, we're a community organization.
Okay,
On the ground, we visit people. They come to us. We see them, whichever is
so
most.
you don't you're not an out-of-pocket.
No, there's
person.
no cost at all. It's absolutely free. That's the whole idea why it was set up,
Okay.
because 25 years ago, several women set it all up because they saw the frustration. They had nowhere to go, nowhere to turn, because, as the question was asked, there was no services to help them in that specific area.
Well, I wish you the best.
So they set it up, and it's been going on for 25 years. I'm just operating it for them. But yeah, it's a free service because of the nature of the service. The people are vulnerable, they're dependent. There's nowhere for them to turn to. If they go to lawyers, well, they're going to go bankrupt on the one hand, or they won't get any help on the other side.
Some of them don't even know. They make mistakes.
All right. Yeah, it's a specialized area, even for professionals.
Okay,
so
thanks
I thank
a lot.
you for my couple of minutes that I've contributed.
Thank you, everyone.